Good evening, members. Before we begin the meeting, I would like to ask my celebrant, Jenny Knight, to guide the council in a moment of reflection.
Good evening. As this is the penultimate meeting this year, I thought it might be appropriate to dedicate my words to a brief review of how we have all endured and in some cases triumphed, and of the historic events that we have seen this year. As before, you are welcome to say a silent prayer of your own as I speak, or indeed just to join me in reflection. As a borough, we have been tested greatly during this year, not least with the terrible fires this summer, and we've seen how the fire service and the local community pulled together to bring it to a safe conclusion. We were able to personally thank the emergency services at the recent 999 Day flag-raising ceremony. We've also acknowledged and celebrated Armed Forces Day, highlighting what they do and how we are grateful for their service. We held another Pride flag-raising ceremony and helped celebrate with the community as they joined us in the borough for their annual event, plus many other activities that I'm sure the Mayor will cover in her roundup. And it's been wonderful to be in a position to participate, to witness and to feel proud of our borough. So as I close with just a few words about the sad passing of Her Majesty the Queen Elizabeth II and how we marked this historic event this year, I thought we should all reflect on her dutiful and dedicated service to us all and how proud we should be that as a borough we played host all those years ago to her military training. There were undoubtedly groundbreaking moments when a female monarch gained new skills and prepared to help in the war effort. And I think that she showed what a truly magnificent leader she was. So, with gratitude and pride, we look back on what has been this year, and with positivity and anticipation, we look forward to what will come. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. Please be seated. Welcome, members, officers, aldermen, and any members of the public viewing at home to this evening's council meeting. Can I remind you, members, that we're now back to a normal practice and operating the convention of standing to speak. Beginning with item number 1, Miss Willis, could I ask for apologies for absence, please?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I've received apologies from Councillor Vivian Chapman, Councillor Sarah Jane Croak, Councillor Mark Gordon and Councillor John Skipper, and I believe Councillor Edward Hawkins is joining us remotely.
Thank you. Moving on to agenda item 2, I propose that the minutes of the meeting of the council held on the 27th of July 2022 be approved as a correct record. Do I have a seconder?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would like to second this motion.
Is that agreed, members? Agreed. Agenda item 3 is my announcements. Firstly, members, you'll be aware that Honorary Alderman Dolores Martel passed away in August. Dolores served as a borough councillor in Surrey Heath from 1983 to 1999, representing the Windlesham ward. She was the mayor in 1993-94, having been deputy mayor in the previous year. Dolores was conferred as an honorary alderman by Surrey Heath Borough Council in March of 2000. On behalf of the council, I send condolences to her family. Councillors, honorary aldermen and members of the public, I would also like to pay tribute to Mrs Louise Livingston, the Head of Human Resources, Performance and Communications, who's leaving the council at the beginning of next month. Louise has been at the council for the past 13 years. On behalf of the council, I wish Louise all the very best for her future at her new job at Wokingham Council. Moving on to my other announcements, Miss Willis, if you wouldn't mind, please. Thank you. Before we move on to agenda item 4, I would just like to take a moment, if I may, to express particular thanks to the Chief Executive and to Mrs Livingston. At the time of the Queen's passing, the pressure that was on the officers to get the procedures and protocols for the council right was immense, and the emails and guidance coming from just about everywhere, I think, was so very intense. And both Mr Roberts and Mrs Livingston went well over and above, in my opinion, what could or should have been expected of them. And I would like, on behalf of the council, please, to note a big thank you for them for the effort that they made at that time. So moving on to item 4, I'd like to invite the leader to make his announcements.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Members, my announcements cover the period from our last council meeting at the end of July to date. And since, as they say, a week is a long time in politics, some of it struck me as ancient history now. Firstly, I'd like to welcome Martin Breeden, the Council's new Head of Investment and Development, who's just completed his first month with the Council. Martin brings a wealth of property, regeneration and retail management experience from the private sector and is a great addition to the Council's corporate management team. As the Mayor mentioned, next month we lose Louise Livingston to take up a director role at Wokingham Council. And I know she's looking forward to us all talking about her and making all these nice comments because she handles that very well. Louise had a number of different roles since joining the council as a senior HR advisor and has managed a wide variety of functions across the whole HR department. At a personal level, I'd like to say that Louise has been a tremendous help to me, particularly in my early days as leader. Some would say I still need a lot of help, Louise, so this is going to be a big job to fill. But I'd like to take the opportunity just to express my thanks for everything you've done for me and for the council. So thank you. With Louise's imminent departure, I'm pleased to announce that we have appointed Sally Kipping into this head of service role. Sally is currently head of HR at one of our neighbouring local authorities, Waverley Borough Council, and Sally will be joining us early in the new year. As the cold weather starts to set in, I just wanted to remind all members of the funding scheme we launched a few weeks ago at Executive for charities and not-for-profit organisations to help set up warm banks in the borough. These are places that people can go and keep warm during the day, and so they don't have to turn on their own heating that they might not be able to afford. As you know, the council is providing grants of up to £5,000 to support any establishment of warm banks across the borough. We're also playing our own part as a council by ensuring that we have extra seating put into the Square shopping centre for any visitors who wish to stay there longer to keep warm and safe. And I'm pleased to confirm some questions have been asked about Wi-Fi, and there is free Wi-Fi available within the shopping centre. We continue to provide support to those residents most in need, and I'm pleased to announce that by the end of September, we had distributed over £2.5 million to Surrey Heath residents through the £150 energy rebate scheme for households in council tax bands A to D. And we added a discretionary £33,000 to residents in bands A to H on low incomes. A big thank you once again to our Revenues and Benefits team for putting these arrangements in place and making these payments so quickly. And we were well ahead of many other councils in making those payments. You may have read there were a number of people complaining, when are they getting it, when are they getting it? Well, in Surrey Heath, we were one of the first to distribute the money. So well done to that team. Last week, I was part of the evaluation panel that met with the companies who tendered for the contract for managing the Square shopping centre. As members will recall, we have had a long-standing contract in place. The Council's Property Investment Working Group felt it was the right time to test the market again through a formal tendering exercise. This would ensure the council and our local retailers in the square had the best possible support in place. Evaluation of the tenders and due diligence are currently underway, and we'll be in a position to take the outcome of the process to executive in December for a decision. The new contract would then be operational earlier in the new financial year. I met with leaders and chief executives of boroughs and districts in Surrey recently to explore the potential role for boroughs and districts in any future county deal. As members will be aware, following the presentation by Councillor Tim Oliver, leader of Surrey County Council, in this chamber in the summer, the county are intending to submit a proposal to the Secretary of State for a county deal based on Tier 2 powers. This is an option that excludes the requirement for an elected mayor for the county. County deals, as indicated by their name, do not explicitly acknowledge the important roles of boroughs and districts, and it's hoped that we can positively address that through the county deal for Surrey. This is going back. The GMB bin strike was in August, and members will recall we had a challenge of industrial action undertaken by the GMB union. This impacted on our contractor, Amy, who are responsible for bin collection and street cleaning. Members will recall that the strike action took place during soaring temperatures and what was to become the hottest August ever recorded in this country. It looked like the action of the GMB would have caused a significant public health issue for our residents. However, as a result of positive and decisive action by council officers, Joint Waste Solutions staff, the administration and Amy, the strike action only lasted 2 weeks. It's a tribute to all those who worked hard to keep services going for most of the residents during that period. Both food waste and refuse bin collections were collected throughout. The streets continued to be cleaned, and the residents had a couple of missed collections that were picked up on their next scheduled collection day. Green waste customers were again, unfortunately, impacted, and collections were once again stopped, but we were able to catch up and to extend their contract by the time that they had lost. We've now received confirmation from Surrey County Council of their intention to centralise the operation of their grounds maintenance, including maintenance of highway grass verges and their on-street parking enforcement service. Previously, this was undertaken by us, along with all the other boroughs and districts on their behalf, and integrated into local service operations. Surrey County Council expects to have their replacement services in place by April next year. While we're apprehensive about their decision, we will work with Surrey County Council to facilitate a smooth transition and minimise as far as we can any disruption to residents. We'll also make sure that we have clear points of contact regarding any service queries relating to their function. At my last announcement, I told you of the huge amount of external recognition we as a council and other local businesses have received within the borough. I'm pleased to add to that list the Mindenhurst construction team has received a rating of outstanding following the recent site inspection carried out by assessors from the nationally recognised Considerate Constructors Scheme. The assessors reviewed the project for 3 key factors: respect for the community, care for the environment, and valuing the site's workforce. Under all 3 categories, the project received a maximum score of 15, giving them a total of 45 out of 45. The achievement of the outstanding score reflects the project's long-standing commitment to community and valuing its workforce. And finally, with Christmas now only a couple of months away, I'd like to remind all members that the box office is open for our annual Panto, right, which this year is Beauty and the Beast. Right, no comments about that, thank you. It's always a fantastic family show, and with all the challenges currently that people are living through, I'm hoping that it's a very enjoyable respite for people of all ages. The show starts on the 10th of December, and I'm pleased to report to members that a number of performances have already been sold out. Okay, thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Leader. Agenda item 5, declarations of interest. Do any members have any disclosable pecuniary or non-pecuniary interest to declare in relation to the matters that shall have to be considered at this meeting? Thank you. Item number 6. Moving on to item number 6, the executive minutes and recommendation. Can I have a proposer, please, for the executive minutes and recommendations at minutes 36E and 51E?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that the minutes of the executive 16th of August, 20th of September and 18th of October 2022 be received and the recommendations at minutes 36E and 51E be adopted. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have a seconder?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to second that proposal.
Members, are you happy to receive these minutes and agree with the recommendation?
Agreed? Agreed.
The Planning Applications Committee. Members, as the chairman of the Planning Applications Committee is unable to join us to present the minutes, I will be taking each set of the planning minutes individually and asking for someone to propose and second each set of minutes. Therefore, could I have a proposer, please, for the Planning Applications Committee minutes from the 4th of August?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would like to propose the Planning Application Committee minutes from the 4th of August.
Thank you. Do you have a seconder?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm happy to second that proposal.
Thank you. Members, are you happy to receive these minutes?
Agreed.
Can I have a proposer, please, for the Planning Applications Committee from the 1st of September?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would like to propose the minutes from the 1st of September for the Planning Applications Committee.
Thank you, Councillor Wheeler. Do you have a seconder?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm happy to second that proposal.
Members, are you happy to receive these minutes?
Agreed.
Can I have a proposer for the Planning Applications Committee minutes from the 6th of October, please?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would like to propose the minutes of the meeting of the Planning Application Committee on the 6th of October 2022.
Thank you, Councillor Noble. Do you have a seconder?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would like to second that proposal. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Members, are you happy to receive these minutes? Agreed. Performance and Finance Scrutiny Committee. Can I have a proposer, please, for the Performance and Finance Scrutiny Committee minutes?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would like to propose the minutes of the Performance of Finance Secretary Committee meeting on the 13th and the 28th of September 2022.
Thank you. Do you have a seconder?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm happy to second those minutes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would like to propose the minutes of the Audit and Standards Committee of the 25th of July 2022.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm happy to second those minutes.
August and 19th of October 2020 be received.
Thank you. Do you have a seconder?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm happy to second those minutes. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to propose the minutes of the External Partnership Select Committee of the 6th of October 2022.
Thank you. Do you have a seconder?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm happy to second those minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, are you happy to receive these minutes? Agreed. Employment Committee. Could I have a proposer, please, for the Employment Committee minutes?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to propose that the minutes of the Employment Committee 13th of October are received.
Thank you. Do you have a seconder?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm happy to second those minutes.
Thank you. Members, are you happy to receive these minutes? Agreed. Joint Staff Consultative Group. Could I have a proposer, please, for the notes of the Joint Staff Consultative Group?
Madam Mayor, I'm happy to propose the Joint Staff Consultative Group minutes for the 22nd of September 2022. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have a seconder? Councillor Black, would you be seconding those minutes?
I'd be happy to second those minutes, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Members, are you happy to receive these notes? Thank you. Moving on to number 7, I would like to ask Councillor Sharon Galliford to move her motion.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So, may you live in interesting times, said Confucius. And whether this is a blessing or a curse depends on your perspective. Either way, we are witnessing the breakdown of traditional governance and financial institutions and the inevitable ensuing chaos. Increasingly, there are also limitations on expression, be that through the police and crime bill or censorship in the media. Voting in a democratic society is the one form of expression we still have. However, first past the post is a fundamental reason why more and more citizens are no longer participating in a system where they strongly feel that their vote doesn't count. And they are right. Many of our representatives are voted in on a minority of total votes cast, and governments are formed on the basis of a minority vote across the country. The manipulation of constituency boundaries often makes this more likely. A system where the largest minority obtains 100% of power is a distortion of the people's will. Sorry, did you need a seconder first? I've just realised. No? Okay, thank you. On a local level, few people vote in borough and even less in parish elections. This could be said to be a lack of interest in local politics. However, once again, it mainly comes down to the fact that people feel their vote is not worth casting, as the result will be the same regardless. I won't go into the different forms of proportional representation, but will remind you of the following. The Senedd and Scottish Parliament have operated PR for 23 years now and never had a snap election. Westminster, as we all know, has had 3 prime ministers in 3 months. One was elected by members of the party, thus denying the population a say, and one was elected by 100 MPs, denying not only the country, but also members of the party from voting. This is not democracy, and I very much hope that members of the said party are also not happy with this. Democracy is being circumvented, and it is time for us as representatives to take a stand. As the old institutions no longer serve the people, it is crucial to build new foundations and create systems that do. A key element of this would be the introduction of proportional representation across the board, a system where every vote counts and representation reflects the views of the electorate. I was minded to table this motion by councils for PR and support from constituents. I'm also aware of lobbying groups such as Make Votes Matter and Get PR Done, all of which have growing membership within our own locality. The pressure is growing for positive change, and we can be in the vanguard of that. I therefore urge you to vote in favour of the PR motion this evening. Thank you, Madam Mayor, and I reserve my right to speak.
Thank you, Councillor Galliford. Do you have a seconder?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd be happy to second this motion as proposed by Councillor Sharon Galliford. First past the post is an outdated and archaic system that is better suited to the 19th century rather than the 21st century, when the select few of landowners and upper-class men had the right to vote. With the enfranchisement of the entire population of the country, it's only right that our voting system progresses as well. Throughout my lifetime and throughout the use of first past the post in the post-war era, first past the post has been claimed as the only way to provide a stable government for the United Kingdom. However, that's very questionable over the very recent years, with governments falling, with prime ministers changing without an election, and with, as Councillor Galliford said, 3 prime ministers in as many months and 4 Chancellors of the Exchequer within as many weeks. However, if we look back to only 12 years ago, the most stable government that this country's had in those 12 years was a government that was the result of a hung parliament, where no majority of any party was produced in the House of Commons. Now, many people may have many views as the efficacy of that government, but it provided 5 years of stable government. So I think it's the claim of first past the post providing stability is no longer true. Barriers to proportional representation have long been placed in front of those who've campaigned for it, and the Liberal Democrats have been long campaigners for electoral reform. However, I do note as well that recently the Labour Party membership at their most recent conference supported proportional representation, which showed a marked change in, I believe, the opinion towards proportional representation in the country. I hope that if the next Labour government is, if they win the next election, they do proceed with electoral reform. As Councillor Galliford mentioned, many democratic institutions within the United Kingdom already use proportional representation in Scotland, in Wales, in Northern Ireland, in the London Assembly, in Scottish councils. It almost seems that in nearly every democratic institution in the United Kingdom uses proportional representation, except in Parliament and in English local councils. I think the example of Scotland using proportional representation in their local government elections provides a blueprint for future changes to the electoral rules for local government. I don't think there's many councillors in this chamber at the moment can claim to have won over 50% of the vote in the election in 2019. I do note Councillor Deitch is looking at me, and I know there certainly were a few, but many of us were elected on a minority of votes in our multi-ward seats. Is that right, that councillors are elected without the majority of those voting? And I place myself in that. I was only elected with 40% of the vote in my ward. I think it should be proper that if you are to be elected, that you are elected by a majority of those you seek to represent. In closing, I do believe that electoral reform is a long way off. Political parties, especially the Conservative Party and the Labour Party nationally, are opposed to it, especially within their members of Parliament, because why would you remove a system that places you into positions of power? But I do hope that there is the realisation that continuing with a system of over 100 years, which is being proven at the moment to be failing, is not the right course of action, and that this chamber supports this motion for proportional representation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I would like to invite members to discuss the motion and make any comments. Councillor Malvaganam.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Most of you would not be surprised to know that I support this motion, because we, the Lib Dems, believe in proportional representation, and as it's been very eloquently set out by Councillor Galliford and Councillor Rice, what we saw over the last few weeks, in fact, the chaos that was actually the country was put under by one party, which had less 40% of the population supporting it. And if you had been watching the television, most people, absolutely almost everyone I have seen, maybe I was watching the wrong channel, they have been saying, we need general election now, because we need proper representation, not a minority government. Rishi Sunak, who has been appointed, was not even appointed, like Councillor Galliford said, not even appointed by the members. It was appointed by 100 MPs or more, 100 plus MPs. This system has to change. I do accept what Councillor Rice just said. The Labour Party is actually changing its view. Whether the National Party within the Labour Party will implement it is up to Labour Party. We know the Lib Dems will support PR all day long, every day. I mean, I would very much appreciate if all of you would consider this very carefully. Don't be selfish. Do it for your residents and support this motion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Did anybody else wish to speak? Councillor Perry.
It happens that last election, the majority of MPs were Conservative. They voted for the new leader. That's totally democratic. I really don't understand why comments are being made the way they are. So I think I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any further comments, please? Councillor Bates.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I think I should just refer us back to the motion, because as tempting as it is over the last few weeks to comment about the leadership contest, and I use the word leadership in the loosest sense of the word, that we've just witnessed over the last week or so, that isn't actually what this motion is about. And much as I would love to talk about lettuces and all the manner of other things, that would actually demean the motion that's been brought before us, which was written a couple of weeks ago at least before all of those things took place. So I will just try and stick to the motion as it is before us. Firstly, can I just say, I have always supported proportional representation. I've always believed it's important that every voice and every vote counts. And irrespective of whatever my party has said or any other parties, that has always been my view, that will remain my view, and I'm very firmly of that view. So as a starting point, this is something I would support. In terms of the comments been made by various other people about the Labour Party position, well, I don't mean to demean anybody, but I think probably I might know that more than any other in this room. And it is true to say there has been a healthy debate, but I'm also pleased to say, although it's not relevant to my local councillor role, that Surrey Heath Labour Party were one of those that did actually put forward the recent change at the party conference. That isn't relevant for tonight particularly, but just goes to show what our local Labour Party think about that. In terms of, there is a realism though, that I think people need to be aware, because the Labour Party, if they win the next election, then clearly at the moment, leaving aside any partisan politics, it looks the most likely result, they would have to win under the old system. And there's a number of other things going on in the country that would need to be sorted out. So is it going to be at the top of the priority list? No, it isn't. But I do think there are changes in the party, as others have mentioned, and I do think actually it's being taken much more seriously than perhaps it previously has been. In terms of just a couple of other comments I wanted to make to this, I particularly want to flag up the comment about local government. Many, many years ago, I'm not sure if there's anyone left, possibly Councillor Brooks, possibly Councillor Hawkins, possibly Councillor Chapman, and it was before my time, but we had a situation in this council where every single member was of the same party as the Conservatives. It's not a partisan point. There are places up north where every single member is a Labour member. Such authorities, whilst they may be good for the party you represent, are not good for democracy. That is not allowing every voice to be heard. So I think we have set a poor example in Surrey Heath in regard to that, but equally there are other places up north which have done the same. And that is not in anybody's interest if we do not have those every voices that are heard. We are the voice of the community, and the community needs to recognise or feel that they are being heard in that by having representatives of all the different strands, and that does include, I'm afraid, people with whom I profoundly disagree. So I do not agree, for example, with UKIP. But if there is enough support in this area for UKIP, then they deserve a voice in here. That's always been my view. And then we debate them in this chamber rather than excluding them through some kind of archaic political process. So do I believe as a result of this motion the government are going to change their position? No, I don't. I don't believe, however hard we lobby Michael Gove, who I notice got another new job, I don't think this will be at the top of his list either. But that's not to say that we as a borough can't be standing up before our community to say, actually, it is important your voice is heard, it is important your vote counts, and therefore, for that reason, I will be supporting the motion tonight.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Hawkins, please. Apologies, you got missed in the queue.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and apologies that I'm not with you this evening. You know why. This is a recycled Lib Dem motion, and one I cannot accept, although I have a great regard for Councillor Gallagher, and I support many of the things that she believes in. This is clearly a case of first past the post versus proportional representation. Under first past the post, MPs serve the constituency they campaign in. This makes them more inclined to tackle important local issues. Proportional representation can potentially provide a route for extremists to force their way into the political mainstream, which under the FPTP electoral system, this is unlikely to happen. Some would say that proportional representation produces weak coalition governments, and I think we've had experience of that relatively recently, rather than a strong majority government, which can arguably lead to indecision, compromise, and even legislative paralysis. Actually, I might just take a point here and correct, even the BBC get this wrong. We do not have an elected leader in this country. The Prime Minister is elected leader of the majority group. So it is not a case of the Prime Minister is elected by universal franchise. The universal franchise is that of a 5-year parliament, and it is chosen by the majority group. PR can also reduce accountability to voters, as an ousted party of government can retain office by finding new coalition partners after an election. The adoption of PR list systems weakens the link between the elected representative and his or her constituency. The greater the complexity and choice that PR allows can put voters off from voting by requiring them to have a greater knowledge of individuals and parties' positions. I have an awful lot more that I can say, but I'll use some examples. Now, Councillor Bates will possibly put me right on this one, and I'm happy for him to do so. But I believe that a recent election at the leadership of the Labour Party was carried out under a single transferable vote, which is a form of proportional representation. And David Miliband was heading for leader of the Labour Party. That would have been a game changer. But under the single transferable vote, Ed Miliband became leader. And I think we know what happened then. Examples of proportional representation in one form or another are, other than the one I've given, the Northern Ireland Assembly, political stalemate. Italy, which is a byword for frequent changes of governments. Now we have Berlusconi back in power with a right-wing government, fascist government, one would say. In Scotland, the Greens hold the balance of power in a left-wing alliance with the aim of breaking up the UK. We've, of course, got the method used in China and Russia, which guarantees full voting by everybody, but I'm not quite sure what choice they have on the candidates they would like to pick. Which actually leads me on to my final point, compulsory voting. Now that would be a motion that I would support. So, Madam Mayor, members, as I say, I cannot support this recycled motion, as I think it is a recipe for chaos, indecision, and bad governance. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Hawkins. Councillor Ditch.
Thank you. I didn't actually intend to speak on this motion tonight, but I just wanted to pick up on something that Councillor Galliford said during her address. And that was that words to the effect, correct me if I might have not got it entirely right, but that people don't vote because they think the result will always be the same. Words to that effect. Now, a lot of the comments that have been made here this evening have been about national matters, and I share the contempt in which things have played out in government recently. But we are in Surrey Heath right now. And I don't think that rings true, that comment that you made here, because you've only got to look at this chamber and the people that are in this chamber this evening to see that actually that's not true in Surrey Heath. I wish it was. But the thing is that, I think the Green Party would do a lot better, actually, in Surrey Heath. Not any poor reflection on you, Councillor Galliford or Councillor Barnett. I think you do great work, and I share a lot of your beliefs and values. I don't think it's the voting system is the reason why you've only got 2 members in here. You know, so I think we ought to have a bit of perspective about what happens here locally. You know, there's a very good cross-section of representation in this chamber. Ethnic people, people for different sexual orientations, religions, the whole lot. So, yeah, I won't be supporting this motion. You won't be surprised. And I don't think anyone else should either. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Deach. Councillor Wren, please.
Thank you. Of course, it's not at all surprising that Conservatives aren't voting for this. I didn't think anyone was expecting that, although with recent polling, maybe they'll change their minds. But I think what's important to understand, I think Bates made a good point about bringing it back to local, it's not good for democracy and generally speaking for councils if you have a one party ruling over the party. Just generally, if you're having a good, effective government, it's good and important to have opposition. So I disagree with that point that Councillor Deach, but I understand why you'd want for those political ambitions. Okay.
A point of order, Madam Mayor.
It's fine. No, it's fine. It's fine. I think what's important is that we understand that we have a good proportional representation, so that all votes matter. I also agree and I sympathise with the points that Councillor Hawkins made about compulsory voting. I think that's an interesting point, and I think that might be difficult to implement. But I think more generally, if we're talking about having more effective government, you have to have the votes of the people represented equally. So that's the point we'd like to make.
Thank you. Any more speakers, please? If there are no more speakers, then Councillor Galliford's right to reply, please.
Nope.
Sorry. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a few points there. Whether the UK system is a good system, and it was mentioned that it is regarded as such around the world, I think that depends on where you are in the world, to be quite honest. It hasn't always served all of the nations, in the Commonwealth and otherwise. I'd like to draw attention, just looking at the world situation. In Western Germany, post-World War II, the Allies, which included us, actually imposed proportional representation upon that country. It's been one of the most stable and successful democratic systems in the whole of Europe. Over 80 countries around the world use proportional representation. And I have to say, speaking to many, many friends I have in Australia, compulsory voting is not particularly appreciated. I don't particularly want to make this political. Councillor Deach, the reason that we don't have many Greens standing is because not many people in the area wish to stand on our behalves, unfortunately. But I think locally it is very important that we have a spread of different opinions. And you are correct. I think this council has improved drastically since that has occurred. And I think that alone is a good reason for looking at proportional representation across the board. So I thank you all for listening, and let's go for a vote.
Thank you, Councillor. I'd now like to move the vote on the proposal, please. We have a show of hands for those in favour, please. And those against, please. Moving on to item number 8, the pay award. Do I have a proposer, please, for the recommendation in the agenda report?
Yes, Madam Mayor. I'm happy to introduce the report and to propose the recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Black. Do you have a seconder?
I would like to second that motion.
Thank you, Councillor. Members, are there any comments? Councillor Bates?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. There's two parts to this, one of which I hope is uncontroversial and the other perhaps is more so. In the bit which I don't think is are we dealing now with the pay award? Or are we going to deal with, yes, okay. So the bit which I hope is not controversial, which has been discussed at length, is regarding the staff pay element of that. That was discussed at length, and I certainly don't propose to deal with that again now, and I'd be very happy to support that. The bit which I think is a little bit more controversial, I suppose, is regarding the consequent 8% increase in members' allowances from the 1st of April 2023. My own view is I think that should be the 1st of May 2023. And the reason for that is because I do actually believe that it should be linked to staff pay. And I know that there is a break in terms of staff pay now compared with councillors in April. However, as every councillor is aware, they will be standing for election in May. And my view personally is that councillors should not be benefiting by 8% unless they're actually elected to do so. So my own view, for what it's worth, I've no idea if there's a second or any support for this whatsoever, but my own view is I would suggest that that is actually moved to from the 1st of April to the 1st of May, and that from the 1st of May, councillors have the 8%. I do, by the way, think it is reasonable for councillors to have an increase. I know that every member in this council has different financial circumstances. Some, they don't need they don't need the monies. Others, for whom this is their only income. But I just think it should be that we don't benefit ourselves, but the new council do. So for that reason, I would like to propose, and if there is a seconder, great, that we amend that to the 1st of May 2023 instead of the 1st of April.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Wheeler first.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would like to second that amendment.
Lovely, thank you.
Thank you.
Members, has anyone any more comments, please? Councillor Malvaganam.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We should all foresee what was happening, which I've been speaking at many meetings, and inflation has caught up even with our council. Hence, we got the additional 500,000 coming into our budget, which already been stretched, as we know, up to about 7 million, so it's 7.5 million. But the real problem I have is not, it's the next year. I know the Employment Committee has discussed it in depth. They understand what's going on, but giving an 8% today up to March 2023 or whatever it may be, then there's going to be another hike, because the cost of living crisis is not 8%. The food inflation on its own is running about 15, 20% or whichever newspapers you read. The reality is that 8% is not going to cover our staff's costs. So I would ask the administration, the exec, to bear that in mind when it comes to pay increases for next time and creating a budget. Because last thing you want, and I've had conversation with the chief executive in particular, that we are losing staff because we can't pay them enough. We don't pay them enough. We have never paid them enough. We should never be in that position. We should pay them enough so that we can retain good people. I'm sorry, because Mrs. Livingston is leaving us. Maybe it's not the reason she is leaving, but that could be one of the reasons. But we are losing staff. So please consider this carefully the next time around. I know it's been dealt with. For the moment, I will be supporting this, and I agree with Councillor Bates on the council allowances. I would push it up to the election and say, after the election, if you guys want it, then let the Employment Committee at that point or prior to that point discuss this separately. So I would be supporting Councillor Bates's motion or amendment. Thank you.
Are there any more comments on the amendment, please? Councillor Galliford.
Yeah, I would also like to support the amendment and remind members that actually we are able to decline any increase in our own personal allowance or indeed not to take it at all. So please bear that in mind as well. Don't jeopardise the staff's pay rise on this particular point. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader.
Thank you. I actually, oh, sorry. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Sorry, force habit. I support Councillor Bates's point that this moves it out. I think my original thought was that it actually tracked the members' allowances, tracked with the staff pay rises. So if it was going to be a pay rise from the 1st of October, then the members' allowances went up. And I had a conversation with the monitoring officer and the chief exec saying, I don't feel comfortable at all with the members getting a pay rise of 8%, effectively voting for ourselves, albeit indirectly. And I think it would be a good idea that the allowances were delayed until the new council came in. The monitoring officer pointed out that because of the independent remuneration panel, we're actually, our allowances can only be adjusted annually anyway, and annually means 1st of April. So I was happy that it went to the 1st of April. There's no material difference there between the 1st of April and the 1st of May. But I support the principle, but I actually, if Madam Mayor would allow, I'd like to ask Mr. Watson a question. Because what I wouldn't want to do, I think the election is the 4th of May. 4th of May, isn't it? Yeah, 4th of May. For my Lib Dem and Labour colleagues, it is the 6th of May. Okay. What I would hate, Councillor Bates, is that we pick the 1st of May. It means that the Finance Department has to do something for all of our allowances from the 1st to the 4th. Some of us don't get re-elected or stand down, and then they've got to put that. So I'd like to ask Mr. Watson if there was a more appropriate date for the change rather than the 1st of May. Perhaps maybe the 4th or 5th of May wouldn't give this little silly anomaly of we would all still get a 3-day pay rise or something. So, Mr. Watson.
Thank you, Leader, Madam Mayor. The answer simply is not really no. We will apply any sort of pay increment through the payroll system that would pay it. Now, obviously, if we were to do it at some point in May, it may not actually show in the May statements, but it would be backdated to that day. And I believe, speaking with the monitoring officer just now, it would be the 8th of May would be the day when it would come into effect. That ties in with the municipal year.
Councillor Bates, would you like to accept that amendment to the amendment?
Madam Mayor, I agree the 8th of May. I think the principle is what we're trying to adhere to. The only reason I suggested the 1st is for a payroll month, that's all. But if the 8th is more appropriate, more than happy to agree with that.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other speakers to the amendment, please? Should we take it forward to the vote then, please? Could we have... Councillor Bates, do you wish to exercise your right to reply? No. Can we have those in support of the amendment, please? Carried unanimously, I believe. Thank you. So, members, could we just vote, please, on whether the recommendation in the report agenda, obviously subject to the amendment, is now agreed? Could I have a show of hands, please, those in support of? And me, sorry. Yep, that's carried unanimously. Thank you. Moving on then to item number 9, I'd like to invite the leader to introduce the report of the Governance Working Group and move the recommendations therein, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Members, the Governance Working Group is recommending one amendment and what I would term some administrative changes to Article 13 of the Constitution. The main amendment is related to mandatory training. Currently, our Constitution states that members must undergo mandatory training in a number of areas in order for them to vote on multiple matters. While this is obviously an admirable goal, it's not practical and unenforceable if it were. Members have the right to vote on matters, as that's what we were elected to do. The Governance Working Group decided, therefore, that there were distinct areas where mandatory training was appropriate and some that were not. Planning, licensing and employment subcommittees were examples where the Council was likely to be challenged if decisions were taken incorrectly, and a lack of training for members would obviously weaken our case. However, mandatory HR training to be on the Employment Committee and mandatory equality training to make any decision in full Council were deemed to be disproportionate. Since training must be proportionate, the Working Group are proposing that training for planning remains annual, licensing, standards and HR training is biennial. Ad hoc training will of course still be organised for members and we're encouraged to take it up, but the scope of mandatory training has been aligned with our real needs. The administrative changes include splitting the nomination list to outside bodies sent to members at the start of a fiscal year, highlights those positions that are reserved for the leader and other portfolio holders. Another is where outside bodies are location specific. Preference will be given to the local ward councillors to be appointed before anyone who's not in that ward. And changes referencing our current management structure. I hope members will support these proposals. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Leader. Do you have a seconder? Councillor Malvaganen? Thank you. Members, are you happy to agree?
Let them second it first.
Okay, carry on. Right. Members, is that agreed?
Agreed.
I'm sorry. Councillor Rise.
Sorry to delay this. While I don't have a problem with the removal of the mandatory training on equalities, I think it's important that, and I do note that it is kind of referred to within the papers, but I think it's important that the training continues to be provided for equalities training and that it's billed as that it is expected that members attend that training. Obviously, no one can be forced to. I think equality training is important. It's not just kind of woke nonsense. It's really applying the values of diversity and inclusion to the decision making that we take in this chamber. So I've noted the leaders nodding along with what I said regarding expected. So I just thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Rise. Councillor Tapper, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I am a little concerned that this wording is somewhat ambiguous. It does, if you read it strictly, mean that the Planning Application Committee will only receive training once a year. I would like assurances that that's not the intention of what's said here, and that if there is more frequent training provided for the Planning Committee, that will be also permitted and not forbidden on the basis that we can only have it once a year. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Are there any further comments before we go back to the leader? No? Leader?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councillor Rise, yeah, I was nodding. The problem the Governance Working Group had was the whole thing about mandatory. You know, in theory, Councillor Noble just arrived. There's a vote the next day. She hasn't had time to get training. The Constitution, as it currently stands, says you can't vote because you haven't had equality training. You know, she was voted. that the residents didn't ask her if she had a quality training. She was voted in and said, please represent us, albeit a minority of the number of people who voted, but you know, that's how it works, this system. Don't shout point of order. Was it 66%? Okay. Well, I stand corrected then. I was certainly voted by a minority. I think, the group just looked at it and said, you know, there's things that mandatory should be, and there's things that shouldn't be. Councillor Tapper, you're absolutely right. It's not meant to be ambiguous. The point that the group were making, the governance working group was making, was training should be concentrated in the beginning of year 1 and the beginning of year 3. Right? I note that we've been invited to training weeks before the term finishes, right? Which I think has now been cancelled because, you know, but in terms of planning, yes, the idea is to concentrate all of the training in those 2 periods, but if something changes and we need updated, then absolutely the training will be there and it will be provided, as with every other subject. Right? So I hope you're assured by that.
Thank you, Leader. Following those comments, members, are you happy to agree to the report of the Governance Working Group as presented to Council by the Leader?
Agreed.
Thank you. Now moving to item 10, questions from the public. I'm advised that a question has been received from a member of the public under Council Procedure Rule 10, but unfortunately he's not with us this evening. So I would ask the Chief Executive, please, if you read on his behalf.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is a question for Mr. Bain, and he has asked, how will rising interest rates affect the Council's financial performance? Thank you.
Thank you. I'm advised that the Finance and Customer Service portfolio holder will respond to the question.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I believe Mr. Bain is watching via YouTube this evening, so thank you for your question, Mr. Bain. And I believe you've got COVID or something in the family, so I hope that's out of the way fairly soon. In response to your question, I'd first like to repeat the response that the Council's Strategic Director, Finance and Customer Services gave when he was asked a similar question at the Past Performance and Finance Scrutiny Committee. And that is, we are of course not possible for the Council to influence the major economic factors that have emerged in recent years to impact on interest rates. Issues such as the cost of COVID pandemic and the Russian invasion of Ukraine and the impact this has had on energy prices have combined to drive up increases in inflation, which in turn has led the Bank of England Monetary Policy Committee to increase UK interest rates. All the Council can do is plan to mitigate as much of the impact of these economic conditions as it can. In the next year or two, rising inflation will impact on Council service budgets, reflecting the rising costs. With regard to our external contracts, we do have standard contractually defined mechanisms for uplifting the contract price annually in line with the inflation rate. The Council will also have to accommodate increases in the cost of wages, supplies and services, which will represent an additional pressure to be managed as part of our annual budget setting process, which is already underway. Service managers are already reviewing contracts to see what the likely uplift will be and are exploring mitigating actions, further efficiencies and income generation opportunities that could be delivered to mitigate the situation. If several service level implications arise from this exercise, any proposed change will of course come before Council. Debt servicing costs will also increase this year as we refinance some of the outstanding short-term loans that mature and move a number of those short-term loans into long-term facilities. The Council's finance team have been proactive and have already arranged favourable rates for deals on short-term loans that mature in the next few months. The finance team maintain a close eye on debt and investment maturities and are planning to reduce funds in the investment portfolios that can be used to pay off more of the debt, therefore eliminating the interest payable on those debts. The Council has to keep an element of liquid working capital for the revenue account, but there are funds available that could be used to release for debt repayment. This is effectively changing more of the Council's capital financing requirement into internal borrowing, the label they put on it. During the past year, the Council has moved from more of its long-term debt into long-term fixed-rate loans, more recently the Phoenix Life package, on top of the existing long-term Public Works Loan Board loans that support the property acquisitions that have been made. The interest rates on these have been significantly higher than the short-term loans being used, but they are fixed for the lifetime of the loan. Rate changes tend to be cyclical, and if inflation rates, as predicted by market analysts, fall in about 12 months' time, it is likely that the Bank of England base rate will also reduce. It's worth noting that the Public Works Loan Board interest rate is pegged to UK 10-year gilt rates, which have risen in the past few weeks as the financial markets take account of the estimated level of central government borrowing required to fund the declared government policies. But this, of course, could change again soon, given the change in leadership and cabinet. In summary, I would repeat that this council, like all councils, is not immune to the changing economic climate, and that the current rise in inflation and interest rates will form an important part of the context of budget planning over the next couple of years. The council has robust reserves built up over several years of prudent financial management that can be used temporarily to support the annual budgets. But this is not, of course, a long-term solution, but a method that we can use at this stage in the national economic cycle to smooth the impact of it on the local taxpayer. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Perry, and thank you, Mr Bain, for your question. Moving on to item 11, questions from councillors. I can advise that no questions have been received from councillors. Leaders' question time. I would now like to invite members to ask questions of the leader, Councillor Alan McLafferty, on issues relating to executive functions. Please be aware that the 20 minutes is allocated to the leader's question time. In order to give everyone a chance, I will try and ensure all members have had the opportunity to ask a first question before I invite you to ask a second. So if you have more than one question, please can I ask that you prioritise a first. I appreciate that it can be helpful to give context to your question, but, I ask that you get to your question as quickly as possible so that we can hear as many questions as possible in the time allowed for this item. Could I please have the first question from members? Councillor Tapper.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm sure many members will be aware from the contact that we had with their residents that there is a serious problem within the borough regarding the non-emptying of dog poo bins. Certainly Heatherside has been reporting numerous cases of dog poo bins, not only overflowing, but piling up around the base as well. My understanding is that this is the responsibility of the council's contractors, Glendale, rather than Joint Waste Solution, wherever these are. And residents tell me that they have been communicating with environmental health within the council en masse to complain about the unsightly mess and the stink that is emanating from these bins. Could I therefore please ask the leader to liaise with the executive member with responsibility for this area of operations to ask environmental health to produce a report to each executive member of the number of complaints that have been received from members of the public across the borough for this particular problem that we're experiencing at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tapper. Leader?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's a broad subject being leader. You know, discussing county deals and, you know, the other end. I'm more than happy to take up with environmental health and talk to them, but we happen to have the portfolio holder who's been giving me a nod. I'm not sure if that nod is, you go ahead and answer that, Alan, right? Or yes, I'm happy to give some information to Councillor Tapper, but where are we on that?
Happy to provide an answer.
I'll allow my colleague to take up.
Or as much of an answer as I can. So I guess my portfolio actually is JWS, and you're absolutely right. The majority of dog poo bins are managed, well, the council dog poo bins are managed by Glendale. Oddly enough, I believe that there are at least 4 providers of dog poo bins in the borough. So off the top of my head, there is Glendale, and we've probably got the most in our parks, but then you've got the Defence Infrastructure Organisation do some, Accent have some, and Surrey Wildlife Trust have some. What we're planning to do, actually under something that we're planning with Joint Waste, is to map all of the bins, not just dog poo bins, but all bins across the borough, so that residents can report overfull bins online, and that the bin that they're referring to, the complaint gets through to the provider of the bin. So that's work in progress. I'm not quite sure when it's going to be complete, but I'm quite happy to sort of provide a written update to members. Mr. Stevens is nodding well across there, which is good to see. In terms of the Glendale contract and our bins, we do have a problem, but the problem is close to resolution. So we had a problem with staff. You might imagine it's not the most popular job in Surrey Heath, but we've got a new member of staff. They are being trained on the rounds. They've got to know where these bins are. In fact, I have a meeting with Mr. Stevens on Friday where, funnily enough, dog poo bins is top of the agenda. And I'm hoping that by then I'll have a response, which again I can update members on Friday mid-morning, on when we are expecting Glendale to be at a point where we stop getting dog poo bin complaints. Being Mr. Dog Poo Bins, I can assure you I want it to stop as much as you.
So next question, Councillor Malvagan first, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The reason I didn't rush to second the previous motion which Leader was talking about with governance, because I was thinking of the question. I'm sure Leader always looks forward to this part of the session. I shall take the conversation a little bit higher than the dog poos on this occasion. I mean, as we all know, we as a council have been going through a pretty tough time over the years, and we are digging into, my real issue is we are digging into our reserves of 7 million. And Councillor Perry has actually very well articulated the point as to what has been done regarding interest rates, which Mr. Bain has trumped me, because I had it on my list, but there you go. Thank you for that answer, Mr. Perry, Councillor Perry. My point here is that cost of living crisis, which I've been crying out over a year and a half, possibly 2 years, is upon us. What's on top of that is the recession. Recession, even again, I said we are heading towards a recession. Most likely we are in recession right now. The problem we have as a council is our reserves. And
I'm sorry, Councillor, I'm being
I'll try to
asked
keep
to
it quiet.
push you to your
Very
question,
short.
if you wouldn't
No, I'm
mind.
coming to the point. The recession is actually going to eat into the cost of living crisis. In turn, our residents, in turn, our revenues. As we know already, the retail is suffering or will suffer, and which means rental income fall. Can the leader tell us how much work has been done in the background for the next, not the 4 years, and years beyond? Because that, I believe it's not a medium term anymore of planning. I believe it's a long-term planning the council needs to go through. I would be happy if the leader would be good enough to answer it. If he doesn't, I'm quite happy for him to write to me. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Leader?
As always, Councillor Malvaginam, clear and concise, straight to the point. I think I'll give you credit that you have been saying for 2 years that we are in a financial crisis and we're heading towards recession. Not a lot I could do about that, but you did keep telling me. I think the point you're making is what are we doing in terms of longer-term planning? The medium-term financial strategy is, of course, a 5-year strategy. We've gone through, and you were instrumental in getting us to do this, along with a number of other members. We did the root and branch review of costs built up from base zero. That has triggered a lot of discussions, as you say, in the background about what are we going to be doing next year, the year after. What's become absolutely clear to me is that when we did this only a few months ago, we had in let's say, a far, far more subdued pay rise for the staff. And then we really have had to re-look at that and say, okay, we can pat ourselves on the back. The officers did a fantastic job, identified £2 million worth of savings. We haven't cut into services. We'll continue to do what this council has always done, deliver good services. And then we looked and said, we really need to address the staff pay issue. 8% from the 1st of October is the right thing to do. We've done that. That's £500,000 this year that we weren't expecting in the medium-term financial strategy, and £1 million next year, and £1 million next year, and £1 million. So it's a moving feast, and we're trying to react to what's happening in the world and what's affecting our council and our costs. I think the shorter answer is twofold. One is that we're reviewing the finances on a regular basis and seeing where we can identify more costs. In the Property Investment Working Group, we're seeing more income coming in than we had actually planned or expected in the medium term. So that's good. We're renting out things. Offices are going out. Even retail is better than we expected. Cash collection is better. So it's a balance, and you're seeing the income changing, in most cases for the better, but we're seeing the costs deteriorating for the worse, and we're having to monitor that. But the 5-year strategy is in place. The second thing is, and Councillor Perry has said it, this council, whatever people think, good, bad, or indifferent, this council has built up substantial reserves, and we have those reserves, and in crude terms, we have them for a rainy day. Well, we all know it's pouring down right now. It is time to use those reserves. We are using them in a very, very cautious way, and I think those remain in place. And my objective is very much that we continue to weather the storm. We continue to take, as the Chancellor says, very difficult decisions, but ideally we protect the services to our residents. So I hope that suffices.
Thank you, Leader. Councillor Wheeler.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I have 2 questions. I'll ask them very quickly together and just see if I can sneak both of them in without anybody really noticing. My first question relates to, I think, probably partnership working and the situation that we've had in Chobham since June, whereby Affinity Water have failed to fix a leak, and we have a neighbouring property which is flooding, and we have water pouring down the high street, which is particularly galling when we still have a hosepipe ban and a water shortage from Affinity Water. So I would just like to ask the leader whether or not, through the partnership working groups that we have, if we could call in Affinity Water to ask them to justify as to why they feel this is acceptable. As a council, we have looked at any legal confines that we have, and we haven't. There's very little that we can do to force Affinity Water to actually action anything. I've liaised with Surrey County Council and Highways, and I've had support from the Surrey County Councillor that represents this area, and we've not managed to move it forward. As we approach the winter months, the risk to the highway is extreme as the water flows across both a roundabout and 2 corners. So I would ask if something through the Partnership Working Group could be looked at. And the other one relates to an unlawful incursion through travellers on private land within the village, whereby the landowner is failing to act. Other councils have taken the view that this is essentially permitting an unlawful caravan site and have moved forward much faster than this council has chosen to do on this particular occasion. The neighbours are suffering from reported intimidation, extensive noise, and as a council we've failed to act on this now for a number of weeks. So I would be grateful if somebody please could comment on that as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Leader?
Thank you, Councillor Wheeler. We did notice it was 2 questions. I've got no problem with the External Partnerships Committee looking at that. Some members may have noticed in the governance working group proposal that I put forward earlier, the governance working group are actually looking at the external partnerships and deciding whether instead of it being, I think it's a select committee, could we make it a scrutiny committee and give it a bit more teeth so that it can make recommendations to the executive, and we can try and make that a bit more of a powerful committee than it currently is. And I've got no problem talking to the chair of the committee and asking that they bring in, did you say Affinity Water? Okay, so we can do that. I think I'd go a little bit further as well. I know you've only asked for that, but I think as well, I think I'm perfectly happy to get the details from you of exactly what's happening. And perhaps I write to the company and express our dismay that this has been allowed to go on for so long and try and demand an answer from them that perhaps we can give to the residents. Your second one, unauthorised encampment. Is it an actual unauthorised encampment, or is it a site that's starting to be developed for gypsies and travellers?
It's very difficult to answer that question on the basis that there are traveller families that are causing a nuisance on private land within my ward. They don't own the land on this particular occasion, so it's being permitted by the landowner, effectively.
Okay. Okay. Right, in which case then I think that sounds like something that our enforcement team should be looking at, and I'm more than happy to liaise with them. Again, get the details from you and then we'll take it from there.
Thank you, Leader. We have time for one more question. If any other members have questions of the Leader? Councillor Malvagnam.
Nobody at all?
Councillor Malvagnam.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's not a question which I should have started off in my previous statement. I want to congratulate the Conservative government and the Conservative members for, not Liz Truss, sorry, for appointing Rishi Sunak, Asian, the first premier, Asian premier for United Kingdom. Thank you.
More of a statement than a question, but any more questions, members? Anyone else? No, thank you very much. That now concludes the business of the meeting, and I'd like to thank everybody for attending.